Subscribe to my YouTube channel, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts. The heavy oak doors of the city's most prestigious restaurant thudded shut behind her, and for a moment, Amelia wished she could disappear. The laughter was immediate, sharp, cutting, as if the very walls were mocking her too. Every head turned to look, every eye narrowed with judgment. It was a place of silk ties, designer dresses, champagne flutes, and whispered conversations about stocks and summer homes. And here she was, plain, simple, with a canvas tote slung over her shoulder and shoes that had seen too many miles. She stood awkwardly in the grand entrance, beneath glittering chandeliers that looked more expensive than everything she owned combined. A few women at the bar exchanged amused glances. A man in a tailored gray suit smirked openly, nudging his companion. "Wrong address, sweetheart," he called out loud enough for half the room to hear. A small ripple of laughter followed. Amelia's cheeks burned, but she forced herself to breathe. She hadn't come here for approval. She had come because she had no other choice. Squaring her shoulders, she approached the front desk. The hostess, a woman with sharp red lipstick and an even sharper stare, raised one perfectly arched eyebrow. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Amelia placed a crumpled sheet of paper on the marble counter. "I have an appointment," she said, her voice steady but soft. "With Mr. Lancaster." The hostess glanced at the paper, barely disguising her disdain. "Mr. Lancaster," she repeated, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. More laughter. Someone muttered, "She must think he's hiring maids tonight." The hostess didn't move. She just stared at Amelia, as if daring her to realize she didn't belong. After a long, heavy silence, she gave a fake smile. "I'm sorry, but there must be some mistake," she said smoothly. "I suggest you try the cafe down the street. They might have something more appropriate for you." A deeper wave of laughter rolled through the lounge. Amelia's fingers curled around the edge of the counter, knuckles whitening. Every instinct screamed at her to leave. To run. To spare herself the humiliation. But she stayed. She remembered the letter tucked safely in her bag, the name written in thick black ink. William Lancaster. She wasn't wrong. She wasn't here by accident. Taking a shaky breath, she straightened her back and said louder, "Please. I was invited. Mr. Lancaster is expecting me." The hostess's smile thinned even further. Clearly unwilling to cause a scene, she picked up the phone with the air of someone dealing with a particularly stubborn stain. "Wait here," she said curtly, dialing quickly. While Amelia waited, she could feel the eyes burning into her skin. Every whisper seemed magnified. Maybe she's a charity case. Maybe she's lost. No. Look at her bag, probably here to sell something. Jewelry, maybe. More laughter. Her hands trembled slightly, but she buried them in her dress pockets. Amelia knew how they saw her. Ordinary. Poor. Unimportant. She wasn't angry at them. Not really. She had spent her entire life being overlooked, underestimated. It had become almost familiar. But tonight would be different. Tonight, they would learn. The hostess, still on the phone, suddenly sat a little straighter. Her eyes flicked nervously toward Amelia. She muttered something into the receiver, nodded several times, then hung up quickly. Her entire demeanor shifted in an instant. "If you'll follow me, Miss Amelia," she said in a voice that now trembled slightly. The room stilled. The same people who had been laughing now watched in stunned silence as the shabby-looking woman was led through the velvet ropes, past the golden tables, and toward the private rooms. Amelia walked calmly, feeling every stare prickling her back. A young woman in a glittering black gown hissed under her breath, "Who is she?" Someone else muttered, "This can't be right." Behind heavy velvet curtains, the atmosphere changed. The noise of the main room faded away. Here, in the private dining section, the air was different, quieter, heavier, more serious. The hostess gestured to a door at the far end of the hall. "Mr. Lancaster is waiting inside," she said, avoiding eye contact. Then she turned and walked quickly away. Amelia stood for a moment, collecting herself. This was it. No turning back now. She knocked gently. "Come in," a deep voice called. Inside, the room was surprisingly simple. A large oak table, a few leather chairs, a fireplace burning low. And behind the table, a man in his 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, stood up as she entered. William Lancaster. One of the wealthiest men in the city. A name that appeared in business magazines and charity galas. A man who owned real estate from London to Sydney, companies from Cape Town to Toronto. And he was smiling at her like she was the most important person in the world. "Amelia," he said warmly, moving around the table to shake her hand. "I've been looking forward to this." She blinked, momentarily thrown off by the genuine warmth in his voice. You know who I am?" she asked quietly. "Of course," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Your mother was one of my dearest friends. She helped me when no one else would. And now, it's time I return the favor." Amelia's breath caught. She hadn't heard her mother's name spoken with such respect in years. Mr. Lancaster gestured for her to sit. "There's much to discuss," he said. "And much that you deserve to know." She sat down slowly, her mind spinning. Meanwhile, back in the main room, the laughter had died completely. People whispered in confusion, trying to piece together what had just happened. "Maybe she's his relative," someone guessed. "Or maybe she saved his life or something," another said, desperate for an explanation. None of them had any idea. In the private room, Mr. Lancaster opened a leather folder and slid it across the table toward Amelia. Inside were documents, bank statements, titles, pages and pages of things she didn't fully understand. "You see, Amelia," he said, leaning back. "Your mother left something behind. Something meant only for you." She stared at the papers, heart pounding. "You," he said, smiling again, "are worth more than all those people out there combined." Her head snapped up, eyes wide. "I don't understand." "You will," Mr. Lancaster said. "In time." Outside the door, the world continued spinning, but for Amelia, everything had just changed. And for those who had mocked her, a lesson was about to unfold, one they would never forget. Amelia stared at the thick leather folder lying in front of her, feeling as though she were in a dream. Pages peeked out from the edges, covered in numbers, signatures, and seals she didn't recognize. Everything inside that folder looked complicated, important, and terrifyingly real. William Lancaster sat across from her, calm and patient, giving her the time she needed to absorb the moment. The crackle of the fire in the grand fireplace filled the silence between them. Finally, Amelia found her voice. "But, why?" she whispered, her fingers trembling as she brushed the edge of the folder. "I don't understand any of this. My mother, she never told me anything about this." Mr. Lancaster nodded thoughtfully, his silver hair catching the warm light. "She wouldn't have. That was the agreement we made years ago," he said quietly. "Your mother wanted you to live a normal life, without the burden of wealth or the dangers that often come with it." Amelia frowned. "Danger? What kind of danger?" Lancaster leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers together. "There are people," he said, voice low, "who would do terrible things for money. Your mother knew that better than anyone. She came from old money, Amelia, very old. A fortune built over generations. But she chose to leave it all behind to protect you." The words hit Amelia like a blow. Her whole life, she had thought they were poor because they had to be. She remembered growing up in a small, peeling house on the edge of town, watching her mother work 2 jobs to make ends meet. She remembered nights when there wasn't enough food for both of them, and her mother always pretended she wasn't hungry. She remembered second-hand clothes, empty Christmases, and endless promises that things would get better someday. And now, this man was telling her that all along, there had been another life waiting, hidden away, sealed off like a secret kingdom. Amelia shook her head, trying to clear it. It doesn't make sense, she said, voice shaking. If she had money, why did we live like that? Why struggle? Mr. Lancaster's eyes softened. Because it wasn't about money, Amelia. It was about freedom. Safety. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. She believed that a simple life, even a hard one, was better than a dangerous one filled with greed and threats. She wanted you to grow up strong, independent, without the shadow of fortune shaping who you became. Amelia's throat tightened painfully. All the time she had been angry at her mother, resentful even, flashed before her eyes. She had never understood why her mother made the choices she did. Now, guilt clawed at her chest. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. What happens now?" she asked hoarsely. Mr. Lancaster smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Now, you step into the life that has been waiting for you. If you choose to." He tapped the folder lightly. "In there, you'll find the details. A trust fund. Properties. Investments. All secured. All legally yours, transferred on your 25th birthday, which, if I'm not mistaken, is today." Amelia gasped softly. She had almost forgotten. Today was her birthday. She had turned 25 just this morning, alone in her small rented apartment, eating stale toast for breakfast. Mr. Lancaster's smile grew warmer. "Happy birthday, Amelia." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Everything felt surreal, like standing on the edge of a cliff with the ocean roaring below. Slowly, carefully, she opened the folder. The first page alone made her heart race. An account balance so large she had to read it twice to believe it. Properties listed in cities she had only dreamed of visiting: London, New York, Paris, Melbourne. Shares in companies she'd seen mentioned in financial news she never paid attention to. It was overwhelming. Terrifying. Incredible. She closed the folder gently, her mind spinning. "I don't know if I can do this," she said in a small voice. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about this world." Mr. Lancaster leaned forward, his expression serious now. "You are not just anything, Amelia. Your mother believed in you. I believe in you. Money doesn't change who you are, it only changes how you move through the world." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And trust me when I say, there are people who are already watching." A chill ran down her spine. "Watching?" she echoed. He nodded grimly. "There are always those who sniff out new wealth like wolves. Friends who aren't friends. Opportunities that are traps. You must be cautious." Amelia swallowed hard. The idea of stepping into a world where she had to be suspicious of everyone was horrifying. "I don't want to be rich if it means losing everything I care about," she whispered. Mr. Lancaster smiled sadly. "Then you'll be fine. Because the ones who survive wealth are the ones who never let it own them." He stood and walked to a cabinet, returning with a small, black velvet box. "This," he said, "is the key to your mother's estate. It's in the countryside, a few hours from here. It's been waiting for you." She stared at the key, feeling the weight of it in her hand. So much was happening so fast, she could hardly breathe. Mr. Lancaster watched her carefully. "Take a few days," he said gently. "Think about what you want. When you're ready, call me. I'll help you." Amelia nodded numbly, clutching the key tightly. They stood, and Mr. Lancaster extended his hand. "You're stronger than you know, Amelia." She shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm steady her. As she left the private room and stepped back into the main lounge, the atmosphere shifted again. Every head turned. Every whisper stopped mid-sentence. The girl they had mocked was no longer just a stranger. She was someone important now. The hostess who had humiliated her earlier practically stumbled over herself to bow and offer her coat. Amelia took it calmly, offering only a polite nod. She walked through the restaurant with her head held high, the same eyes that had sneered now watching in confusion and awe. Outside, the night air was cold and crisp. She stood for a moment under the glittering city lights, clutching the key and the folder close. Behind her, in the shadows of the restaurant's grand windows, she could feel their eyes still watching, still trying to figure out what had happened. But Amelia didn't care anymore. She had a life to claim. A legacy to discover. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She stepped into the night, ready to face whatever came next. But little did she know, her journey was only just beginning. Because somewhere in the dark, someone else was watching too. Someone who knew exactly who she was. And what she now had. And they were not happy about it. The drive to the countryside was long and winding. Amelia watched the landscape change through the window of the black car Mr. Lancaster had arranged for her. Tall, glass skyscrapers faded away into green rolling hills and sleepy little villages. The closer she got to the estate, the more a strange mix of excitement and dread filled her chest. The folder sat on her lap, unopened since she had left the restaurant. She hadn't dared to look at it again. It felt like carrying a secret too big to touch. Instead, she stared outside, letting the hum of the engine and the blur of the passing scenery calm her. The driver, a silent man in a crisp black uniform, glanced at her once in the rearview mirror. "We're almost there, Miss Amelia," he said politely. She nodded, her hands tightening on the folder. Minutes later, the car slowed and turned onto a narrow private road. Tall ancient trees lined both sides, their branches arching overhead like a tunnel. The late afternoon light slanted through the trees, casting golden beams across the road. Finally, the trees parted, and Amelia gasped. There it was. The estate was massive, an old stone mansion with ivy crawling up its walls, high arched windows, and towering chimneys. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, or a ghost story. The car stopped in front of the grand entrance. Two heavy oak doors loomed ahead, carved with intricate designs that seemed to tell stories of centuries past. The driver stepped out and opened her door. Amelia hesitated, then took a deep breath and climbed out. The air smelled different here, fresher, cooler, filled with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. She walked up the stone steps, the key in her trembling hand. It slid into the lock with a satisfying click. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The inside was dim and silent. Dust floated in the beams of sunlight filtering through the tall windows. An enormous chandelier hung above her, cobwebbed and glittering faintly. The house smelled of old wood, forgotten memories, and something else, something faintly metallic, almost like blood. Amelia shook her head, scolding herself for being silly. It was just an old house. Her house now. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the vast entrance hall. The door creaked shut behind her. For a moment, she stood completely still, letting the silence press around her. Then, slowly, she began to explore. The house was breathtaking. Grand staircases, velvet drapes, dusty portraits of grim-faced ancestors, libraries filled with ancient books, and endless hallways that twisted and turned like a labyrinth. Everywhere she looked, there were signs of a life she had never known, rich tapestries, silver candlesticks, old oil paintings. But there was something else too. A feeling. As if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. Several times, Amelia thought she heard faint footsteps behind her, or a whisper from an empty room. But when she turned, there was nothing there. "Get a grip," she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the unease. She wandered into what must have been a drawing room, where sunlight slanted across faded sofas and cracked marble statues. A large portrait hung above the fireplace, a woman in a flowing gown, with striking green eyes and a sad smile. Amelia froze. The woman looked exactly like her mother. But younger. Almost exactly Amelia's age. Goosebumps rose on her arms. Beneath the portrait was a small brass plaque. Eleanor Winthrop, 1977. Amelia reached out and traced the name with her fingers. Was this her mother's real name? Winthrop? Questions piled up in her mind. Why had her mother never told her the truth? Why hide everything so completely? A loud creak from upstairs made her jump. Her heart pounded. The house was supposed to be empty. Probably just the old building settling, she whispered, trying to calm herself. Still, she moved carefully now, every sense alert. She decided to find the master bedroom. Maybe there would be more answers there. She climbed the grand staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth wooden railing. Upstairs, the hallways were darker. The heavy curtains were drawn tight over the windows, letting in almost no light. At the end of the corridor, a massive door stood slightly ajar. Amelia pushed it open. The master bedroom was enormous, with a four-poster bed, a fireplace, and a vanity covered in dust. An old jewelry box sat on the vanity, its lid slightly open. Amelia approached and peered inside. Inside was a necklace, simple, elegant, with a single sapphire stone. She picked it up, feeling its surprising weight. The stone glinted in the dim light. She fastened it around her neck without thinking. As soon as the clasp clicked shut, the room seemed to grow colder. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind her. Amelia jumped, spinning around. The windows were still closed. No wind. Her mouth went dry. The necklace lay heavy against her chest, almost burning. She pulled it off quickly and shoved it back into the box. "Okay, enough exploring for today," she said, her voice shaking. She hurried back downstairs, heart pounding. When she reached the main hall, she almost collided with someone. A tall man stood there, dressed in black, with piercing blue eyes and a cold smile. "Miss Amelia," he said smoothly. "My name is Mr. Carrick. I represent certain, interested parties regarding this estate." Amelia stepped back instinctively. "I wasn't expecting anyone," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Carrick smiled wider. "Yes, well, sometimes surprises come whether we expect them or not." He pulled a document from his coat. "This house, and everything in it, may not be as securely yours as you believe. There are disputes. Claims. And some people aren't pleased that you've arrived." Amelia stared at him. "What are you talking about?" "Mr. Lancaster said everything was legal." Carrick chuckled. "Mr. Lancaster is a lawyer. He deals with paperwork. I deal with realities." He leaned closer. "Realities like hidden debts. Forgotten enemies. Old promises broken." Amelia's mind raced. "What do you want?" she whispered. Carrick's eyes glittered. "To help you," he said softly. "For a price." Before she could respond, he handed her a business card, plain, black, with only a phone number on it. "Call me when you're ready to talk," he said. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows outside. Amelia stood frozen, the card trembling in her fingers. The house felt colder now. Darker. The weight of the past pressing down. She looked at the business card again. Then she looked back up at the vast, silent mansion. She was in deeper than she had ever imagined. And she had the sinking feeling that Mr. Carrick wasn't the only one who wanted something from her. Amelia stood in the grand entrance hall long after Mr. Carrick had disappeared into the gathering twilight. The business card in her hand felt heavier than it should have. The cold weight of fear settled deep in her stomach. What did he mean by forgotten enemies and hidden debts? Was her inheritance really not safe? Had she walked straight into a trap? The old mansion seemed to creak and breathe around her, the silence heavy and thick. Finally, she tucked the card into her pocket and decided to explore further. Sitting alone and worrying would do her no good. She wandered into a smaller sitting room just off the main hall, a cozy room compared to the rest of the estate, with deep armchairs and a massive stone fireplace. A large, dusty mirror hung above the mantel. For a moment, as she caught her reflection, Amelia thought she saw a figure standing behind her, a shadowy blur, tall and thin. She spun around, heart hammering. Nothing. Only the empty room. "You're imagining things," she muttered under her breath. But the unease didn't leave her. She decided to make herself some tea. Maybe a hot drink would calm her nerves. The kitchen was a strange mix of old and new, an ancient stone hearth on one side, modern appliances clumsily fitted in recent years. As she rummaged through cupboards for a kettle, she found something odd. A small, leather-bound journal tucked behind a stack of dusty cookbooks. Curious, she pulled it out. The leather was cracked and worn, and when she opened it, a delicate scent of old paper and ink rose into the air. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, almost frantic in places. Eleanor's journal. Her heart skipped a beat. Her mother? Hands trembling, Amelia flipped to the first entry. March 5, 1990. They are watching again. I see the lights in the woods at night. I hear footsteps in the hallways even when I'm alone. I don't know who to trust anymore. Amelia frowned. Lights in the woods? Footsteps? Had her mother been scared too? The van sped down the narrow country road, bumping and swerving as the driver, a young woman named Lila, glanced nervously at Amelia. "You sure you're okay?" she asked again, keeping one hand on the wheel and the other ready to hit her horn if needed. Amelia nodded weakly, though every part of her body ached, and her heart still thundered against her ribs. She could barely catch her breath. "I don't know who they are," she said between gasps. "But they're after me." Lila gave her a worried look. "Where can I take you? Police station?" Amelia shook her head firmly. "No. I don't know who I can trust. Please, just somewhere safe." Lila hesitated, then nodded. "My uncle owns a farm about 20 minutes from here," she said. "Nobody goes there at night. You can hide there until you figure things out." Amelia squeezed the journal tighter against her chest. She nodded again, grateful. The road twisted and turned, the trees looming like dark sentinels on either side. Amelia kept glancing behind them, half expecting to see headlights chasing after them. But the road stayed empty. Finally, after what felt like forever, Lila turned onto a narrow dirt path that wound its way up a small hill. At the top stood a weather-beaten farmhouse, dark and silent under the stars. "We're here," Lila said, pulling the van to a stop. Amelia climbed out, wincing as her injured ankle protested with every step. The air smelled of hay and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. "This way," Lila whispered, guiding her toward a side door. Inside, the farmhouse was cozy but old, creaky floorboards, sagging furniture, and walls lined with faded photographs. Lila led her into a small room off the kitchen, a storage room filled with old boxes and a dusty cot. "You can stay here tonight," she said, flicking on a dim lamp. "I'll lock the doors. Nobody comes out here without us knowing." Amelia lowered herself onto the cot with a grateful sigh. Her entire body was trembling now that the adrenaline was wearing off. "Thank you," she whispered. Lila smiled. "Get some rest. We'll figure this out in the morning." She left the room, pulling the door mostly closed behind her. For the first time in days, Amelia felt almost safe. She lay back on the lumpy mattress, clutching the journal like a lifeline, and stared up at the cracked ceiling. Her mind was a whirlpool of questions. The order. The necklace. The inheritance. Her mother's warnings. What did it all mean? And more importantly, how could she protect herself? She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, the early gray light of dawn was seeping through the small window. Amelia sat up slowly, every muscle stiff and sore. The house was silent except for the distant clatter of someone moving around in the kitchen. She got up, limping slightly, and moved to the window. The farm stretched out before her, empty fields, a small barn, and a dirt driveway winding back to the main road. No sign of anyone chasing her. Good. She glanced at the journal lying on the cot. Something inside her told her she hadn't found all the answers yet. She picked it up and flipped to the back, feeling along the spine. It was thicker than it should be. With trembling fingers, she tugged at the leather cover. It gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a folded piece of parchment, yellowed with age. Carefully, she opened it. It was a map. Not of the estate, but of something beneath it. A hidden chamber. Her breath caught. So that's why the Order had been searching so desperately. It wasn't just about the necklace or the house. There was something hidden underground, something they were willing to chase her for. Something her mother had tried to protect. Amelia traced the map with her finger. The entrance was marked with a small X, behind the old stone fireplace in the library. A hidden door within the hidden door. She would have to go back. A chill ran through her. Returning meant facing the men chasing her. But if she didn't, they would never stop hunting her. She needed to find whatever her mother had hidden before they did. She needed to end this. Amelia made her decision. She turned to find Lila standing in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of steaming coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Lila said, handing her a mug. Amelia forced a small smile. "I might as well have." She explained everything, the journal, the necklace, the hidden map, the secret chamber. Lila listened in stunned silence. "So, what are you gonna do?" she asked when Amelia finished. Amelia tightened her grip on the coffee cup. "I have to go back," she said firmly. "I have to find whatever my mother left for me." Lila shook her head. "You're crazy. Those men, they'll kill you if they catch you." "I know," Amelia said softly. "But if I don't do this, they'll never stop. I'll never be free." Lila hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Then I'm coming with you." Amelia blinked in surprise. "You don't have to." "I know. But I'm not gonna let you face them alone," Lila said, a determined glint in her eyes. "Besides, I've always wanted to be part of a real-life mystery." Amelia laughed, the first real laugh she'd managed in days. It felt good. By mid-morning, they were back in Lila's van, winding their way toward the estate. Amelia kept the journal and map tucked safely in her backpack. Every mile closer made her more nervous. She kept scanning the tree lines, expecting black vans or shadowy figures to leap out. But the road stayed empty. Finally, the gates of the estate loomed into view, old iron and stone, half hidden by creeping vines. They pulled over and parked a good distance away, hidden behind a stand of trees. "We walk from here," Amelia said. Lila nodded, slipping a heavy flashlight into her jacket pocket. Together, they crept through the underbrush, staying low, moving from cover to cover. The mansion loomed ahead, silent and forbidding. No sign of Carrick or the other men. Maybe they had given up. Or maybe they were waiting inside. Amelia's heart hammered as they slipped through the broken side door into the darkened halls. The house smelled of damp wood and old secrets. Every step echoed too loudly in the silence. Amelia led the way to the library. It was just as she remembered, books tossed everywhere, chairs overturned, the smell of smoke and dust hanging heavy in the air. The fireplace towered at the far end of the room, massive and ancient. Amelia moved quickly, searching for the hidden mechanism. She found it, another carved rose tucked into the stonework. She pressed it. With a grinding sound, a section of the fireplace swung outward, revealing a narrow stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. They exchanged a glance. Then, together, they stepped into the hidden passage. The air was damp and cold. Their footsteps echoed off the stone walls. Amelia gripped the map tightly, using it to guide them through twisting tunnels and crumbling stairways. At last, they reached a heavy wooden door set into the rock. The final destination. Amelia pushed it open. Inside was a small stone chamber, lit only by the beams of their flashlights. In the center of the room sat a pedestal. And on the pedestal, resting on a velvet cloth, was a small, intricately carved box. Amelia approached it slowly. Her heart pounded in her ears. This was it. This was what her mother had hidden. She reached out and lifted the lid. Inside was a small, leather pouch. She opened it. Out spilled a cascade of glittering stones, diamonds, rubies, emeralds. Wealth beyond anything Amelia had ever imagined. But there was something else too. A small, rolled-up scroll. She unrolled it carefully. It was a letter, written in her mother's hand. To my dearest Amelia. If you are reading this, then it means I am gone and you have returned to claim your birthright. But know this, the true treasure is not the jewels or the estate. It is the strength within you, the courage to stand against fear, to fight for what is right. This family's legacy is now yours to protect. Trust yourself. Trust your heart. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. All the fear, the pain, the uncertainty, it had all led to this. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it close to her heart. Suddenly, behind them, a low voice echoed through the chamber. Touching, Carrick said, stepping into the doorway, a gun in his hand. But unfortunately, it ends here. Amelia and Lila froze. They were trapped. Nowhere to run. Amelia's mind raced. She needed to think fast, or everything would be lost. The cold barrel of Carrick's gun glinted under the flashlight's narrow beam. Amelia felt Lila stiffen beside her. Her own heart thudded painfully against her ribs. They were trapped, deep underground, stone walls on all sides. There was no back door. No secret tunnel leading away. Only Carrick, the order's top enforcer, blocking the only exit. You've been a very difficult girl to catch, Carrick said, stepping closer. His voice was smooth, almost amused. But you should have stayed quiet, little heiress. He gestured with the gun. Hand over the jewels and the letter. Amelia swallowed hard. Behind Carrick, two more men appeared, stepping into the chamber, both armed, both smirking like they had already won. Lila's hand brushed against Amelia's, a small, silent gesture of solidarity. Amelia knew they had seconds to act, or it would all be over. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. Trust your heart. Amelia's mind raced. Carrick wanted the treasure. He wanted the family's secrets. If she gave it to him, he would kill them anyway. But if she made a move, they still had a chance. Amelia slowly reached into her jacket as if to pull out the pouch. Carrick's eyes tracked her hands greedily. But instead of the pouch, Amelia grabbed the heavy flashlight hanging from her belt. In one swift motion, she hurled it at Carrick's face. The room exploded into chaos. The flashlight smashed against Carrick's temple with a sickening crack. He stumbled backward, cursing loudly, his finger tightening on the trigger. But the shot went wild, shattering against the stone wall. Lila didn't hesitate. She lunged forward, slamming her shoulder into the nearest thug's gut, knocking him off balance. Amelia darted toward the pedestal, scooping up the velvet pouch and the letter, stuffing them into her backpack. Carrick recovered fast, blood trickling down his forehead, and aimed his gun again. "Enough," he roared. But Amelia wasn't frozen anymore. She was running, grabbing Lila's hand, dragging her toward the door. Bullets ricocheted off the stone walls behind them as they sprinted down the passageway, back toward the main house. Their footsteps echoed loudly, giving away their position, but they didn't stop. They couldn't. Freedom was just ahead. They burst out of the hidden fireplace entrance into the ruined library. Dust and ash clouded the air. Behind them, Carrick shouted orders, and the thugs pounded after them. Lila grabbed a heavy bookcase and, with a grunt, shoved it over. The bookcase crashed to the floor with a thunderous boom, blocking the passage behind them, at least for a few precious seconds. "This way!" Amelia gasped, dragging Lila down another hall. They ran through the empty mansion, dodging fallen beams and shattered glass. Amelia's lungs burned. Her injured ankle screamed with every step. But she didn't dare stop. Finally, they reached the side door where they had first entered. Lila yanked it open, and they stumbled out into the sunlight. Freedom. But Carrick and his men were already pouring out behind them. "They're getting away," Carrick bellowed. The chase was on. Amelia and Lila sprinted across the overgrown gardens, weaving between broken statues and crumbling fountains. The dirt path back to the van was just ahead, but it felt miles away. Amelia's heart sank as she heard the roar of engines. More black SUVs were tearing up the road, racing toward them. They were surrounded. "Over here!" Lila shouted, yanking Amelia toward the thick woods beside the estate. Branches scratched their arms and faces as they pushed through the undergrowth. Shots rang out behind them, whizzing through the trees. Amelia ducked instinctively, her heart hammering. She didn't dare look back. Finally, after what felt like hours, they stumbled into a clearing, and straight into another figure. Amelia skidded to a halt, fear shooting through her. Was it another member of the order? But then she saw the familiar face, grizzled, stern, but kind. It was Officer Grant, the retired policeman who lived near the edge of the estate. He held a shotgun in his hands, and behind him were 2 patrol cars, their blue lights flashing. "You picked the wrong estate to mess with," Grant growled at the black SUVs roaring toward them. The police officers sprang into action. Within minutes, the clearing was filled with shouting, handcuffs snapping, men being wrestled to the ground. Carrick fought like a wild animal, but it was no use. 6 officers tackled him, pinning him down. "You don't know who I am," he snarled. "You're under arrest," Grant said coldly, snapping the cuffs tight. "For trespassing, assault, illegal possession of firearms, and about a dozen other charges." Amelia sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and overwhelming emotion. It was over. Finally, it was over. The aftermath was a blur. Police combed through the estate, uncovering hidden rooms, stolen artifacts, and evidence linking Carrick and his order to crimes all over the country. The newspapers exploded with headlines. "Secret Society dismantled by Quiet Heiress." "Silent Strength, the woman who took down an underground empire." Amelia sat quietly through it all, answering questions, signing documents, working with the lawyers her mother had secretly arranged for before her death. She learned more about the order, how they had been manipulating old families for decades, stealing fortunes, erasing histories. And she learned just how carefully her mother had planned everything, trusting Amelia's heart to find the truth. Weeks later, Amelia stood alone on the front steps of the restored estate. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The house looked different now, alive again, windows shining, gardens blooming. The estate was hers, fully, legally, undeniably. Not just the wealth, but the history. The legacy. Lila came up beside her, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You really are something, you know that," she said, handing Amelia a mug. Amelia smiled shyly. "I didn't feel like something," she said. "I felt scared. Lost." Lila bumped her shoulder playfully. "Doesn't matter how you felt. Matters what you did." They sat on the steps, sipping tea, watching the sun dip below the horizon. For the first time in months, Amelia felt peace settle inside her. The world was still dangerous. There would always be shadows, secrets, struggles. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She knew who she was. Not just an heiress, not just a survivor. A fighter. A protector. A woman who had faced the darkness, and won. Epilogue. Months later, Amelia turned the estate into something her mother would have loved. She opened the gardens to the public. She created scholarships for orphan children. She funded historical preservation projects. She used her wealth not to live grandly, but to give quietly, just as she had lived quietly. And sometimes, when people visited the estate and saw the soft-spoken woman tending the roses, they would whisper among themselves, "Who is she, really?" And someone would always answer, "She's the quiet woman who changed everything."